Kia ora tātou, welcome back everybody. Right, now moving through to number 10 on our order paper, which is around Featherston Street safety improvements and additional New Zealand Transport NZTA funding. So I'll ask Bryce Hosking to present this. I don't think I've ever seen him move so quickly. All right, sorry Bryce, page 163 of your papers, councillors.
I'll try and get some music to play every time I sit down for a report. Kia ora everybody. Basically an opportunity here. NZTA have provided us the opportunity for some additional funding to add to the current scope of the Featherston Street project that is currently being undertaken. To do some of the elements that essentially we had value engineered to essentially not deliver, so we could stay within the previous budget envelope. But now that NZTA have provided the opportunity for this funding, basically seeking approval from council to actually use the funding to deliver on some of those other scope items. I'm largely happy to take this paper as read. The paper covers exactly what those items are. I guess importantly, we have checked with the contractor, Higgins, who's currently doing the work. Absolutely no concerns about them taking on this extra work within the current work program, and still ensuring that the project as a whole will be delivered within the time frame we require. And probably the only other comment I would make is it doesn't fundamentally change the current designs that have been approved for this section. There are a couple of elements like the crossings on the side roads that previously were not reflected in the design, but they don't impact on the current design at all. And they were actually key items that came through quite loud and clear through the workshopping process, especially with the disabled community and also the senior citizens. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks Bryce. Councillor Naylor.
Oh, thanks. Just the fourth bullet point in 1.2 talks about additional placemaking elements, including bench seating, etc. I just had heard recently about some play activities that were going to be established on the footpath outside the school. Is that part of the placemaking elements of this, or is that something separate?
When we're talking about placemaking, we are including all sorts of things. It is a pretty wide-ranging topic, and yes, it includes those kind of things: bench seating, the opportunity for some electric bike charging stations, etc. Things like that.
The play activities on the footpath.
Yep. That would be
that's included.
That's included. So the kind of so when we talked earlier, my comment earlier about value engineering things out to stay within their original budget parameters. Some things like that, for instance, we wouldn't have ordinarily done, but since we have an opportunity for some further funding, that opens up some of those opportunities to do some elements like that to engage with the public when they are in the space.
Okay, so just in terms of those play activities, I know there was some engagement with the Disability Reference Group about that, and particularly some concerns are raised about how much that will impact on pedestrians needing to get where they need to go. What level of comfort can we have? I mean, it struck me when I heard it that perhaps those play activities would be better suited to be somewhere else, not on a footpath. What can we understand further about that activity at this point, and what is your comfort? What level of comfort do officers have around that not being an obstructive thing for pedestrians, particularly people who need a mobility device of some sort and who might need a bit more space than just someone walking?
Absolutely, a very good question. Look, I think councillors can have a high degree of comfort that we're trying to deliver balance here. So keeping footpaths clear and able for people to be moving around. The placemaking elements are adding vibrancy to the area. They're not there to take away from that. So, we'll be working through the sort of final placement of those and designs and making sure that they're put in a place that I guess will limit any kind of obstruction to those kind of areas. Much like bench seating, for instance, we'd put it in an area that maybe had a wider area like a berm, for instance, say outside Mitre 10, as opposed to looking to put it dead smack in the middle of a footpath, which is not particularly useful.
Okay, thank you.
That's where I was going to go. Bryce, I have seen the temporary and the movable, I suppose, gym type equipment on a big sort of movable sort of plate. Is that the sort of thing that's on the grass berm outside Mitre 10? Is that what you're talking about?
That is a good example of that, yes.
Yeah.
So it doesn't need to be there permanently, it can be taken away. There may be some elements that may stay for a much more enduring period, but again, that's a good example of putting it in the space but not looking to obstruct a walkway.
But isn't this extra budget about finishing the actual physical infrastructure of the cycleway and any sort of raised platforms?
Primarily, yes. The placemaking element of this, to be fair, is a very small amount of it. Pretty much, I'd go so far to say 90% of the funds will be used for the raised crossings and the separated things. The placemaking is really just to add to the vibrancy.
So, and when you say placemaking, and again on the other Councillor Naylor's questions around seating and planting mainly, and the movable stuff may come in, may not.
Absolutely, correct.
Okay. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to that gym equipment that's outside Mitre 10, was that moved from the Esplanade River pathway to be placed there? Where did it come from? Because I've just had feedback that some of the gym equipment down the Esplanade's been removed, and I'm going, I'll put two and two together.
Not 100% sure where it came from, but yes, I believe it is the same equipment that was been moved for several other places around the city in the past. Yeah, there was that came about on Featherston as an opportunity for, I mean, it got created to be able to be moved around, and so hence it being there. Whether, as I said, it's not really designed to be there from an enduring standpoint, I suspect it'll move again to another location in the future. But yes, I suspect it is the exact playground, play equipment you're referring to.
Okay. Is there any images that you can put up on a slide to show us the treatments this will come? Because for 500,000 to have a 2-page report is just without any of that kind of detail seems a little. Is there any opportunity to see the images before we debate?
I don't have them to hand. We can absolutely provide the detailed drawings. As I said, for context, out of that 500, let's say 50 grand max would be for the placemaking. 450 grand of it is, or circa $450,000 is absolutely concentrating on the raised platforms and adding extra separators and the likes. So we do have some designs for those side streets, in particular with the raised crossings that we can share. I don't have it to hand right now. In terms of the placemaking, absolutely we can share more detail on exactly what that looks like and exactly where we're looking to place it. At the moment, we've done very limited work in this space, simply because we don't actually have approval to spend this extra money yet.
Okay. With the work that's been done so far, because they've water blasted all the lines in that did exist, it seems like the inner roadway or the central roading corridor is quite rough and it looks like it's broken the seal. Is that the end result that we're going to live with, or is there some of this money can go back and rectify some of the work that's been damaged?
So
on the
importantly, apologies, Councillor, didn't mean to cut you off. Importantly, NZTA have been very specific around what we can use this funding for. It cannot be used for reseals. So when we approve the Featherston Street project as a whole, as we currently have, councillors will recall, we asked for some additional resealing funding for the cycleways in particular, and that's because that wasn't able to be included within the NZTA funded portion, and this is no different. So we can use it on certain things which have been specified here. We can't be using it to reseal Featherston Street, for instance. So the greater sealing of Featherston Street and the actual, I guess, traffic lanes or road corridor will happen and will be scheduled as part of our reseal project in future years. So I would say the improvement to it should improve from where it is at the moment. It'll get a good sweep, it'll get a bit of a tidy up, but it definitely will not be getting completely resealed in that section at this stage, only in the cycleways.
Is the reseal budgeted or unbudgeted, and if it's budgeted, for how much?
It is included in the reseal program in the LTP to be done, I believe in about 2 or 3 years' time. I can't recall the exact figure for the whole length of Featherston Street, but I believe it was around about $4 or $5 million to get that all done.
Okay.
That was taking it from Botanical all the way down to Ruahine Street, if I recall.
Okay. With these additional treatments, because there's been a heightened frustration, I guess, with the communication with businesses particularly, but also the school, specifically Central Normal School, has there been any consultation with these additional treatments and the frustration that might bring to those, and can you feed back to us what their feedback has been?
We've been in constant communication with the school. For instance, the raised crossing on Aroha was actually something that they had requested specifically. So, not surprisingly, they're pretty excited about that coming onto the plate now and getting delivered. We have a contact or two, importantly, at the trustee board, and I guess we're relying on them to be disseminating through information to the balance of the board. We don't typically sit down with the entire board and deliver comms. We're relying on their couple of nominated people. But wherever possible, we are trying to keep everybody in that stretch of the road up to date with what we're doing, and trying to resolve any sort of conflicts or issues as they arise.
Just in the assurance with that member of the board of trustees, is that the chairperson, and why wouldn't we also include the principal?
In terms of exactly who our contact is, excuse me 2 seconds.
Councillor, I've been in touch with them as well. The principal's changed. They've had a change at the beginning of the year, and he was the one leading the initial opposition, but then other members of the board have contacted us with a different version. So I'm not sure what the officers have had.
Yeah, Michael's just informed me that yes, we've been speaking to the principal, but also the deputy principal has been a consistent contact point throughout that process, especially given the principal changed, as the Mayor referred to.
Okay. And just lastly, Mr Mayor, with the treatments that have been in place, the feedback I'm getting is a lot of concern around the placement of those bus stops outside the supermarket and outside the opposite side of the road. Have you had any feedback, and are you still comfortable that they're going to work efficiently and successfully for the overall design? And because my concern is we spend this extra 500,000 in this direction, and yet we might get requests once this is all complete to actually move those bus stops further away from their current locations, and so I just want to make sure we're getting some financial provision, thinking about that very real, in my mind, possibility being requested.
We're constantly monitoring the traffic flows, and in particular around that instance at the moment. I guess I would caveat that a little bit to say, given we're sort of mid-construction, there's a lot of cones still up and the likes, it is quite difficult to get a real accurate gauge of what any wait time might look like. Is it, how much of a disruption has been caused from that bus stop versus maybe just the wider general works that are currently underway. So there'll be an element of that sort of benefit realisation work that will need to be done afterwards. By the nature of the project as well, I think it's worth noting that we are only doing a little bit in the middle with the balance to be done. Typically it is the kind of project that until you've actually done the full stretch of it, again, those benefits may be difficult to truly get a good idea of, because you actually start to get enough of a flow, whereas if you've done a bit in the middle, you're essentially bottlenecking people into a small captured area. But absolutely, I can give assurance that we are monitoring that. We've been doing traffic monitoring. We've been trying to get an idea of wait times. The times we've seen so far, any sort of wait from the buses pulling into that area have been within what we were expecting. However, as I said, I'll reserve judgment of what that looks like until the project's completed. To refer to the second part of your question, which is around budget provision, should we have to make any further changes? One of the proposed programs in the long-term plan is around public transport. And that does allow us a bit of an opportunity to be making any tweaks to any of our public transport work that we're doing at the moment. Should we have to add additional bus shelters, move one, make a change because it had an unintended consequence? So that is currently provisioned for through the LTP if we need to.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, I'm going to ask for one further question. The works here seem to be in the first stage of this on the Rangatiki Street to Botanical Road piece with Tainui and Campbell and the raised crossing at Aroha Street. Is it likely we're going to need some treatments across Ngata Street and potentially North Street and the crossing at Boys High? Like, have we thought about the other half of the project, whether that needs these type of treatments and platforms?
Definitely that came into the thinking. So when I talk about the whole stretch and looking at the whole design, how all of those intersections occur, and when we're talking about safety and how they interact, that is definitely something that would need to be considered in the future. As for right now, we're suggesting it does not need to be done, and hence the scope for this additional funding from NZTA doesn't include that. However, as we move past that and look to connect from North Street down to, say, Ruahine and all the way down to Vogel, some of those interactions with those intersections would be considered then.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Bryce.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Bryce. Just interested in the kind of broad advice here, which is to, I suppose, increase what we're delivering within the existing geographic or spatial footprint versus kind of getting on with the next stages of, and kind of why the advice has landed towards the way it has rather than kind of getting on with the full scope of delivery.
The honest and truthful answer to that is that's the parameters that we were operating under from the NZTA funding. So because we were dealing with the Streets of People program, which was only addressing the bit that we're doing,
no, that's clear.
therefore
Thank
this
you.
is additional funding to do that bit.
That makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thanks. Sorry to come back a second time. Just following on from the Mayor's questions around the place-making elements. I think you confirmed to him that those play activity things were movable. Is that correct?
The transporter one that is currently on Featherston Street, that is removable. I guess
the what, sorry?
that is movable again, so that has been moved to the site.
Okay.
That's not to say that there will not be anything enduring there, I guess, but the assurance I gave you earlier is it will not be sitting in the footpath, or we'll be looking to be strategic if anything's going to be there past the duration of the project.
Okay, because the elements that were described to the Disability Reference Group included some quite more permanent arrangements of speed things so that children could run and see how fast they're running in hopscotch areas and things like that, that it seemed to me to be more permanent. So I just thought I'd clarify. So there's some that's movable and some that's permanent, is that correct?
Yeah, in terms of the gym equipment, which the Mayor was referring to, that's movable, so that won't be there forever. But yes, in terms of some of those things, we'll be looking to utilise the wider boom space for some of those elements, not putting them necessarily on the footpath.
Okay, and just in terms of the split between the 450 from Waka Kotahi and the 50,000 from council, are those allocated to specific parts of the program, or is it all of the money just going to all of the? I guess to be more specific, do we need to include the place-making elements to get the funding from Waka Kotahi, and do we have what is the 50%, 50,000 for council going towards?
As with the balance of the project, we're required to fund 10% of that.
10%.
So in order to get the $450,000, we have to put in 50,000. We don't have to include the placemaking opportunities. And to be fair, we probably won't if we didn't get the additional funding. That would be a much more scaled back part of the project. And we were concentrating a lot more on some of the safety elements. But
So-
now that we have the additional funding, it gives an opportunity to maybe do some more of those.
And so how much of the 500,000 is allocated to the placemaking elements?
I don't have the exact figure, but I'll say approximately $50,000 would be towards placemaking elements. $450,000 of the 500 would be concentrating on the other elements.
So if we did the other 450,000, we'd still put up 45,000 and then they'd put up the 90%, is that correct? So if council chose to exclude the placemaking elements from this resolution, would the rest of it be able to proceed with just the 90% of the overall funding? With 10% coming from council and 90% from Waka Kotahi.
Whatever we accepted, we would definitely have to fund 10%. My professional advice would be to take the $450,000, add our 50 in that we can allow for through our current budget provisions, and we can simply take it as an action from here to consider the placemaking options and perhaps not proceed with some of those. But we have the funding available. We could, I guess, decline 50 grand of the 450 and only put up 45, but I think given we have an opportunity to get majority funding for this, it makes practical sense to consider it.
So when you say current funding provisions, do you mean the transfer of program 1559 to that work?
Correct.
So there's no current funding specifically for this work though, is there?
No, so this is all additional work to the scope.
Yeah.
But we have the ability to transfer that $50,000 from another program that'll have very little impact on that project or the work that's underway, in order to essentially unlock the $450,000
Okay.
on offer.
So program 1559 that we would be taking that from, what that's urban cycle infrastructure network improvement. So is there not urban cycle infrastructure network other activity that we would want to invest that in this current financial year?
The current major project being delivered from that program is the Pioneer Highway Shared Pathway and Pedestrian Crossing that Council voted on last month. Given the decision was to keep the crossing in the originally designed location, that allowed us to de-risk that project a little bit, meaning we didn't need as much contingency. Hence, I'm quite comfortable recommending that we would shift the $50,000 into this project here.
Thank you.
Just further to that, Bryce, and I know where the council is going with this, would we be better to say the placemaking elements should be around bench seating and planting rather than movable gyms and perhaps some of the nice to haves? We could be a bit more prescriptive to you on that?
You can be prescriptive to officers, yes.
Yes, okay, great. All right. Councillor Hapera.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Thank you, Bryce. Just following on for Councillor Dennison's questions, just on that bus stop that's on Featherston Street, have you got any cameras in the area that you've been monitoring just to see if there's been any potential accidents with the bus stop?
So I just wanted to confirm my comments before I made them. We don't have any cameras up per se. All of our monitoring to date has been through physical people on site.
Okay, thank you. Second question is, you talked about if we did shift it, that we'd look at the long-term plan next to use the money. What would be a potential cost to shift that bus stop? Have you got an idea of that?
In terms of the average cost of a shelter and moving it there, I would say about $10,000 per stop and shelter if we were going to be moving it.
Okay. Thank you, Bryce. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right. Thanks, Bryce. Okay, so we've got a couple of recommendations here that council agree an additional $500,000 of capital expenditure in the financial year 23-24 on program 2233 citywide urban cycle infrastructure improvement streets for people to deliver further enhancements to the project on Featherston Street. This is an additional capital expenditure funded as A, 90% $450,000 from the New Zealand Transport Agency as capital revenue, and B, 10% $50,000 from council through a capital transfer from existing funds in program 1559 citywide urban cycle infrastructure network improvements. I'm happy to move it. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Look, councillors, I'm really aware what a hot potato this is. I'm going to reserve judgment until the thing is finished. I think it's a little bit unfortunate to judge things, and certainly via Facebook, around how successful this is or isn't. It's like, I take an example, it's like saying your two-storey house doesn't look any good when you've only half built it, and you're midway through it and you're yet to finish it. That's exactly what is happening to this project. I reserve judgment on the bus stops because I think the jury's out on that, but I'm not going to really comment until I've seen the full finished product. This money, and speaking to the officers directly, should go on finishing the physical infrastructure. I don't want movable gyms. I don't want any extras, guys. In all honesty, I think this should be around completing and making the program work properly. Get the full stretch done, get the flows working, get the traffic lights synced. You know, we haven't got the traffic lights synced yet, so there's a real problem there. And look, the road, it's almost like it's never had congestion before, and now it's all of a sudden got congestion. I think we've got to be a bit mindful about all of this. But in saying that, I do appreciate there are some issues there, and again, from the officer's point of view, if we can finish this program as quickly as we possibly can, I think you'll be helping everybody in that space. So look, I think this is actually quite good in the sense that otherwise we'd have a bit of infrastructure that wasn't really connected. This will allow us to connect it properly, get the flows working properly, both for cyclists, but also for drivers and other users. And then we can evaluate whether things are going really, really well. Again, jury's out on the bus stops, but we'll leave that for another day. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I understand your support for this program, but I did hear you indicate an interest in not progressing the additional placemaking elements, and I'd certainly be of a similar mind. I'm very much happy to approve 450,000 of this program. So I'd like to move an amendment just to test that, to change the additional 500 to 450,000, to add in after Featherston Street, excluding placemaking elements, and then to change the amounts in A and B to 405,000 and to 45,000. My reasons are similar to really what the Mayor has outlined.
Sorry, before we go any further, is there a seconder for that? The amendment, sorry. Is there a seconder for that the councillors just... There is none. So do you want to speak to what's there?
Okay, well, I'm a little bit confused, Mr Mayor, because I thought you might have been interested in seconding that given the comments you made about not wanting to progress the place-making elements, but perhaps I've misunderstood your...
You have, yep.
Yeah. Have I misunderstood, Mr Mayor, or...?
Yeah, you've misunderstood my commentary, yes, but I can wrap that up at the end.
Okay. So given that there's not a seconder to that amendment, I guess I'm unsure whether I'll support the program in its entirety. I do have some real concerns about the additional placemaking elements and also the perception of those by our community. I think the perception is that many of those elements are quite unnecessary in the current environment. I also have some concerns about some of the activities that I've heard suggested might be included in that program, about whether that might actually impact having, we've heard from the officer that there is consideration of ensuring that those won't impact on the flow of pedestrians and mobility, but I feel I still have a question mark based on the information I've heard about the nature of those activities, that they are attracting children to try and play on and around the pedestrian area. That sort of activity, I think we have very good parks and reserves for in our city, and certainly think that that's a great thing to have within the grounds of a school. But I do have some concerns, and there were some significant reservations raised by members of our disability community about with the appropriateness of having those sort of play activities in an area where you need good flow of pedestrians, especially before and after school at a very busy area. So I'll listen to other comments and will reserve my right as to how I vote, but I'm a bit conflicted because I do think there's always a good opportunity when there's external funding to utilise for safety treatments, but the entirety of this program as proposed I'm a little bit uncomfortable with.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't expecting to be next in the queue. I'm happy to second this and very much in support of the full package described in the officer's report. Most of this is about safety, as we've heard, and I would go as far as to say even the additional placemaking elements are about safety, as well as making that space more functional. Because we know one element of safety, particularly around roading, is when you introduce an element of uncertainty into a space, then that automatically slows speed down. Now, anecdotal evidence of Featherstone Street at the moment would suggest that high-speed environment, it's not its number one concern, but as this beds in, I do expect that that will become a concern. The placemaking elements that have been highlighted around play, plus seating, plus planting, I don't think anybody's objecting to planting. I feel like we're all pretty on board with that. The seating element, I think the officer referenced that had been particularly strongly supported through the disability community and our elderly community. So this comes down to discussion about a very small play element, which I'm absolutely happy to support. As I said, there is a safety element to this as well. This recognises the community that's using that space. Yes, it's high traffic area on the way to school, but on the way back from school, after drop-off or after pick-up, you often have younger children in a more open environment. It's entirely appropriate and not at all dangerous to have some hopscotch painted on the footpath. I don't think that is going to cause any great problems in that space. So happy that the officer has heard this discussion, can reflect some of the concerns, which are absolutely valid. We want the treatment to be appropriate, but I don't see that as a reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater and start trying to cut this budget into places to drive particular outcomes when I think what we drive will be unintended consequences. So happy to support it as is. Thank you.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I am in complete agreement. I think I'm very pleased to see additional safety opportunities for pedestrians, particularly for Campbell Street, Taonui Street and Aroha Street. There are significant volumes of young people moving in that area, not just for Central Normal School, but also Red Star Dance, and there is a significant amount of traffic turning into those streets at those times. So I really welcome that opportunity. I'm pleased that we have the opportunity to progress those where we wouldn't have otherwise. To my mind, I'm wondering whether within the sort of envelope of funding, whether we've opted for the maximum amount of safety treatments that we can afford, and then the balance of that is insufficient for additional ones, so it's sort of maybe what's left over and able to do a bit of placemaking. But I wouldn't want to see those improvements kiboshed for the sake of a few park benches and hopscotch painted on the ground. I think that there's a lot to be gained for this whole package, and I'm really happy to support it.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This project has given heightened concern to me because of the current response from the public, and this is represented before this project even got started. So I think there's a heightened awareness around what's happening there and even this future budgets, and I'm disappointed we don't have any visuals considering, and the rush process it seemed like to get a decision so the contractor could start. I don't want to feel like I've been left in that same situation of saying yes, which is money from government. And honestly, I am going to say yes to this. It would be odd to say no. But the concerns is there's no image. There's question marks for me around why we're moving gym equipment from the Esplanade pathway where it gets, I would suggest, better use and probably more appropriate space than bringing it right into the side of a busy arterial outside a busy hardware store. It seems like an odd place. I'd say the same thing about hopscotch putting alongside where there's, what are we doing here? It just seems like creating safety, but then we're creating all these other hazards and distractions, not only for the users, but for everyone else driving past and etc. So big issue there. The other one is around the bus stops. I can't help myself to say that when I saw the concrete getting poured in and how they were coming out, I was thinking, like, my goodness. And no wonder I've been getting approached a lot in this last little period around what's going on here and who supported this project and, what's my view on it. But then I get to see that there's live bus stops down Pioneer Highway. I'm just like, where else are we putting these live bus stops without any other signage or warning or comms out? I'm concerned around that approach. The other one too is, I guess the proof will be in the pudding, because we put the cycle lanes in without knowing what success will look like with how many cyclists should be using this. And then even with the bus stops, I know that last month was free. I'm not sure the status of this month, but I'd be interested to know actually the users for the buses, if they've been increasing and if they hold their strength for the value on what we're putting with all these infrastructure adjustments. So they're the two concerns there. And then finally, I can't believe we've sandblasted the lines off the middle of that road, left it all broken and I think putting at risk on deteriorating even faster, and then knowing we've got to spend millions to actually rectify that in another couple of years. I just go like, can't we complete the project and look after the whole stretch and get the what I see the fundamentals addressed instead of putting in beautification works on top in this project? I think some of the Waka Kotahi money should be spent on fixing the seal. It's like some of these are the most important things instead of the nice to have. So I'm raising these concerns because this project's just given, me, I guess, a real discomfort of how it's gone so far and where we're going with it. And the fact that we haven't communicated with businesses clearly, even with these further adjustments, I just can hear it in my ear tomorrow, if not tonight. What are we doing here? So, I'm happy to see it through too, but it's for my mind, I'm just, I can't help but see that there's going to be some further issues. Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I baked a few cakes, but when I bake a cake and it's not looking right, I chuck it out. I don't finish it. I'm sorry, I'm doing the cake analogy because it got brought up to start with. So I can't support this. I know it's money, and it's money from the government, but I'm sorry, I'm saying no. And I'm proudly standing up and saying no, because I'm not afraid to. So I'm not going to support this because I don't support what's happening on Featherston Street. So I am saying no because I think we should fix the mistakes we've got on Featherston Street before we put a plaster over it. So no.
Councillor Wood.
I wasn't going to, but I have to now, don't I? Look, I'm going to vote no on this on principle to start with. That's where my starting point is. I'm reserving judgment until the road's done. I don't think, as Councillor Harper just said, if you've just poured salt into your cake mix, you're not going to carry on making it and see if it tastes bad. Of course it's going to taste bad. I mean, in terms of the negative feedback we've had, the vast majority of the feedback we had in that final report before doing this was negative, and that's now just what's being reflected in the community. So it's no surprise what we're seeing at the moment. It's a poor design. I'm not going to spend more money on a design that I don't believe in. That's my fundamental here. I didn't believe it then, I don't believe it now, and the overwhelming evidence we're seeing is that exactly the same concerns that were raised 6 or 8 months ago are here now. And so I see what you're saying, Councillor Dennison, on, well, it is money, and look, more than anyone, I don't want to say no to money for the sake of it, but at the end of the day, I don't believe in this design. And as Councillor Dennison said, we haven't even seen what's going to be done with this money other than a vague assurance that it'll be some raised pedestrian crossings. So we don't actually know what we're buying, voting on this today. In terms of more separators, as one specific point, I don't believe we should be increasing the number of separators on the road. If we can make it do safely with what we've been doing, all we're buying ourselves by putting more separators on is more maintenance to have to replace them all in 4 or 5 years' time when they need replacing. So if we can make do with the current design for separators, I don't actually see ourselves as buying something of any value by putting more in other than an increased future cost. So on that one specifically, I don't support it. To Councillor Naylor on the 450,000, I think what the officer said is that we can still take the 500,000 and just not do the playmaking stuff. That's why we don't need to decrease the amount we're taking. That's why we can still take the whole amount if we were to vote for this. But yeah, I don't believe in the design. I'm not going to reserve judgment till it's over. I'm going to stick with what we're hearing from the community. And I really don't agree with the concept that we can't have an opinion on something until it's over. I mean, at the end of the day, we're seeing what we're seeing. We're going to have to spend a lot of money fixing what we've done already. And so I don't support the design. I'm not going to take more money to fund it. That's my stance.
Councillor Finlay.
I don't know. I've lost count on how many people have mentioned Featherston Street to me and what we've done there and the names they called. A lot of the things I couldn't repeat here, I'll get a smack on the hand, so I better not say too much. But when you've got a dog's breakfast, you feed it to the dog. You don't tart it up.
Councillor Meehan.
Sorry. Just a few comments on the sideline, as usual. Just the bottom line is, when we vote for something to go ahead, and then we start seeing the mess it's creating, we don't like to admit we mucked it up. We've mucked this one up, and we need to own it. Okay, we mucked up. Didn't vote for it at the start. Ain't supporting this. Ain't supporting nothing to do with Featherston Street, where it's going. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it looks like the discussion and debate has broadened out a little bit more than just what we're going to do with this additional offer of money. But speaking of the offer of money, I'm trying to work out to some extent if I'm still in the same meeting that I was in this morning, because there was full-throated support for not only every dollar we were getting from Wellington, but that there must be more, and it wasn't the thousands or the 10,000s, it's the millions, it's the hundreds of millions, it's the billions, and those are the conversations with Wellington that we need to keep in mind, even on what we might see as fairly minor amounts of money here. So people that are wanting to say no to a 90% co-fund, just think broadly about the message that sends in terms of this community's readiness to accept investment from Wellington. I think to the broader question of how it's all going, we need to keep in mind who we're actually building the city for. Who are we building the transport network for? Is it for everyone? Or is it like Tina from Turner's, cars, cars, cars? We need to think about what a transport network looks like that works for everyone, the young and the old, the commuters, the locals, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of what we are hearing so far is from the people that for decades have had the real privilege of having pretty much 100% of that space to themselves. And they're being asked to do a very tough thing, which is share some of that space with other people. So I get that it's tough. But the reality is we're simply asking to make sure that we build a transport network and a future for the city where everyone can get around in the way they want to, rather than forcing people into cars. So I will continue to support this and would refute the suggestions that it is anything less than a good project for the future of the whole community.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I wasn't going to speak to this, but of course cycleway is always just about bringing out the worst of in the chamber, I think. I think really we're starting to lose the plot in terms of really sort of remembering sort of where we are on this, and Councillor Barrett has really, I think, underlined the fact that there's a co-funding situation where we are the beneficiary to the greatest degree. What's actually proposed here is really just adding some safety elements for pedestrians on the side streets and some additional separators to keep cycles and cars separated. They are safety elements. We've gone down the rabbit hole of talking about movable, immovable playthings and things like that on the side of the road. The reality is that if you're actually going to add value to your neighbourhoods and your places that the public actually use a lot, then it's good to actually have some amenity there for them to use, like seats and gardens. Whether it's a weight training, movable weight training system or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The reality is that we add those elements to support the community that uses those spaces. And it enhances our city. Don't keep diving down rabbit holes and trying to divert this. This has been in our cycling master plan for years. It's part of building a network so we can actually get all road users safely around our city. So please, don't just go down a rabbit hole and just vote against it because it's on principle. We exist in this chamber to do the right thing for the majority of our community, not just a few. And all the noise is coming from a few. So please vote to support something that actually supports the betterment of all road users. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. I'm been quite amazed with the humour. This isn't the great Councillor Bake-Off or Dog Patrol or Turner's car auction. It's actually quite serious. It is about the safety of Featherston Street. And again, I just come back to my earlier comments. If we can park the bus conversation, and excuse the pun, to the side, because that is the thing that has really got people going. And remember, we've got partners in that, and we're possibly the lesser of those partners. We've got the Regional Council and NZTA who have the majority say on that. But look, again, my understanding, we're not making adjustments here. Have we consulted on this? Absolutely we have. Have we seen where this is going? Yes, there is a master plan to this. So it's not as if this has completely come out of nowhere. In fact, this is actually good in the sense that we can actually complete it, and we'll go a vast majority towards completing it and get the connections going. And then we get the flows and everything else starts to happen. Then we can come back and judge those partnered bus stops with our colleagues. So I am of the view, just around the placemaking, and maybe I called that the wrong name, maybe it should be called enhancements. Planting, bench seats, absolutely. I do think they are good. Anybody that walks a little bit, you'll know occasionally you need to sit down or do your shoelace up. If you've got older ones or little ones with you, you need, bench seats are good. And that's a long stretch of road. And my understanding is not one seat or very few outside the bus stops. So I think and it's minor in the scheme of things. I think the officers have got a good flavour of what we're trying to do. So look, this is really, we've started this project. I know people are calling it bad baked cakes or dogs' breakfasts or cars. But it's more than that. It is actually around safety. So please have a look at this seriously. Make your judgment on the buses, which is the real issue, later. But if you could vote on this, please. And that is passed, 8 votes for and 6 against. All right. We now go to number 11, and I'll ask to come back up around our manager around transport, and this is around alternative use of speed management funds, page 167 of your papers. Bryce.
Yes, kia ora again, councillors. So I guess that I'll largely treat this as read. The resolution that was put forward was requesting options to use the funds. Given where we are in the financial year, in order to actually ensure we can deliver what we're putting down in front of you, there aren't really options. Essentially, it's the options I've put out in the paper to you. We can bring forward some raised crossings that we were going to be doing in the next 12 months anyway through our low cost, low risk program. So we can bring those forward, and they are at the request of those individual schools as well. So they've been communicated and been communicating to us for some time for these. And then essentially the balance of the funds, as the report states, will be used to commence some designs for some of the work we've got planned for next year. So very good use of funds. I guess ordinarily these decisions at a project level can be made within the CE's delegation, but given there was a recommendation to come back specifically, hence this paper is with you now. Happy to take any questions.
So Bryce, I'll kick off. So the full cost for these 6 school raised crossings, and it's great to see Bunnythorpe and a few others there, is 433, is that correct?
Yes,
Or-ish,
as you'll see,
450-ish.
that's a very conveniently rounded amount, given the total budget was 833. And really that's just a reflection that we haven't commenced the designs yet, so the exact cost per crossing will be known pretty quickly, but as circa, I think that's a logical split between the two.
Right, and that's all we can get done in that time frame while that money still sits on the table, is that right?
Physically, yes. Fulton Hogan have said they could do 6 maximum, and they would struggle to do more than that before June 30.
Okay. Throw a little spanner in the works. Is there other contractors that, get multiple contractors doing more?
Potentially, we did consider that. Ultimately, we would need to. Fulton Hogan already have the benefit, as this kind of work is typically delivered through our road maintenance contract. They have the benefit of some relatively stock standard designs that they can modify. If we engaged another contractor, they would likely have to do a bit more work, and then my certainty to you around whether we could deliver it would diminish somewhat.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Hapara.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Bryce. So you've got 6 there. How many others are on the list to be done?
Over the next 3 years, there's a number of raised crossings throughout the city. Most schools typically is a great location for them, some of which we've already done a little bit of work on in the city already. Exactly how many is planned over the next 3 years, I don't have that exact figure, but
Can we get those numbers?
I can definitely give you those numbers.
Because these are the 6 that have put their hands up, but if the school didn't know they could put their hand up, they wouldn't know.
We have constant communications with the schools about these. Most schools are, not surprisingly, in favour of having raised crossings. these, whilst they did put their hand up and have communicated to us they would like them, we ran it under a couple of other lenses as well around crash statistics and some of the other points I put in the paper as well. So hence these were at the number one priority over perhaps some of the other schools.
Would it have traffic count?
We do have most of that data. We definitely do for these 6, which I'm happy to share as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and somewhat along your line of questioning. Auckland Transport, who's not known for doing things cheaply, is pumping raised crossings out at between $19,000 and $31,000 each. So I'm trying to understand why we're looking at a $72,000 on average crossing.
Look, it'd be fair to say we've taken a very approximate lens. There was a very quick turnaround in terms of this paper, and looking to come here, as I said, I suspect the exact cost of the crossings may be able to come down from 72, whether it be 60 or 40, I couldn't say here. Typically what we would do, we've got some more designs we could be using, so if we get some savings from that 433,000, we can simply shift a bit more towards the design panel to still fully utilise the 833 total.
And what is it that's preventing us from shifting it towards a few more crossings and getting somebody else involved to get the job done?
In order to spend these funds this financial year, contractor capacity is the major constraint to doing more physical work. If Fulton Hogan had more capacity, and we did check that with them, and they could have done 8, then we probably would have put forward 8. But I want to be sitting here giving you some certainty of delivery and spending the capital program. As the Chief Infrastructure Officer mentioned earlier, about 90+% is where we're angling towards, and this is an effective way of delivering that. If I committed to 8 and we only did 6, I wouldn't want to overpromise and underdeliver.
Thank you, Bryce and Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going back to the strategy and finance paper, which also made a mention. Can you just understand, one of the suggestions was the intersection at Valley View and Turitea Road and the number 1 line in Lomburn Rongotia Road with warning signs. Was that a separate program, or was that one of the considerations from this budget?
Oops, sorry, apologies. The Turitea Valley Views is definitely a project that sits within low cost, low risk, and that's being addressed through a separate project. So over and above this, in terms of the other intersection, that was coming from a different program, and we were working through with NZTA around the specifics of what we're able to do when it comes to speed management and the likes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Bryce.
Councillor Hapata.
Sorry for coming back in. Just one question. The cost of the crossings on Broadway, were they about the same as what the cost of these crossings are?
Not too dissimilar. They were a little bit higher because it's a wider road corridor and there was a bit more to consider. They were probably up closer to about $100,000 per crossing.
Okay, thank you.
So, Bryce, if we were to add an extra recommendation around exploring other subcontractors, I mean, I'm struggling a little bit why we're just continually using a tier 1 to do what is pretty simple work, really. Could you go away and come back with something quite quickly? If we instructed, around using maybe tier 3 subcontractors or tier 4 small companies, that if you've got these stock standard designs?
I would be quite comfortable taking an action to see how many more raised crossings we could get delivered using some of these funds before the end of the financial year, using whatever means we can.
Yep.
Having to come back through the chamber, though, could be a bit restrictive, and I would be doubtful I could do that.
Okay, well, we could trust the CE to make sure that happens.
absolutely. And we could perhaps just take that action.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, that's exhausted the questions. Thanks, Bryce. Investigate. So essentially, I'm just going to add that the chief executive, we asked the chief executive to explore other contracting options around delivering further crossings, and it doesn't need to come back into this chamber because we've got the funding is there, and I just think we're missing an opportunity here, people, and it is relatively simple stuff. So I think we can do better. Well, I hope we can do better. I've got to be a bit careful what I say. So look, I've moved that, seconded by Councillor Barrett. I'll open it up for any commentary. Councillor Isabella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to repeat my comments from earlier that I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to pursue additional safety treatments, especially in areas where there are large volumes of young people moving around with a lot of traffic going in and out, and also particularly welcome this second recommendation. If we can do more, I would love us to be able to do more. I note we've got 2 schools and a number of ECEs on Albert Street, which is a key traffic route with a lot of heavy traffic that goes along there, and I'm sure there are a number of other opportunities that if we can smash these out before the end of the financial year, I would really welcome that. So thanks for putting that up.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I'm a little bit more comfortable with this, with the additional recommendation, but certainly have a significant amount of discomfort with this view that we have to spend the money by the end of the financial year because it's been budgeted. And if that leads us to operate in a way that doesn't deliver value for money for our ratepayers, then it really concerns me. I think the importance of delivering value for money, in my mind, should come well above delivering any KPIs that has been set in terms of the delivery of capital programs. I mean, unlike what I understand is the majority of you around the table, I do not mind at all if we do not deliver the full capital program. In fact, I long for the day where we only delivered 50% of our capital program, because it's the debt that is associated with us delivering our full capital program really concerns me, and that's a big driver of the rates increase that we see in the first year of our LTP. I think we just need to think about this is people's money here. We need to do these things in a cost-effective way. So definitely, I will support these recommendations. But I just wanted to say my view is that if other contractor options deliver more cost-effective, this work in a more cost-effective way, I don't mind if it rolls into next year. We have the same program in next year's budget. If it doesn't get spent this year, then we just don't borrow it, but we can do it next year. I think we need to move away with being quite so driven to meeting the KPI of delivering a higher amount of our capital program. We do need to think of value for money as perhaps a higher priority to that.
Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to support recommendations along the same lines as Councillor Sabellin. I think keeping kids, people safe in front of schools and even down Broadway is great, and I just think that it's all very good, so very happy to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, the money is actually NZTA money, and unless we use it by the 30th of June, it's gone. Thank you.
Yeah, look, just on the positives there, it's great that Bunnythorpe School and Bunnythorpe's getting some, Councillor Hancock will be very happy that they're getting some investment, and please can you signal that to their community committee? Thank you. To the other schools there, and look, some of the big schools like Palmerston North Intermediate, great to see Central Normal as well. We've heard a little bit about them earlier today in the chamber, so they're getting some investment as well, along with Awapuni and Milson and Our Lady of Lourdes. So that's great. Look, thank you to Councillor Hancock. Look, this is external money. There's no budget existing after July, so we've got to do this. It isn't debt. Just want to clarify, it's not a debt conversation, but the money's there. It's coming externally. If we don't, it's use it or lose it. And I think we can do a bit better. So thanks to the officers for the work done so far, but Bryce just giving you a little bit more to do. Thank you. We'll vote. As passed, 14 votes for and none against. Thank you. Right, I'll just see where we're up to next. Right, up to number 12, and I'll invite James, our transport planner, and David Murphy. This is around the fast track approval bill and a submission to that. Page 171.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I want to acknowledge James's work on the submission. It's largely an advocacy planning thing, but with the links to the ring road, we threw it to James. He rolled his sleeves up and got it done for us, as he does, so thank you, James. Just a couple of points before we answer any questions. As detailed in the submission and the committee report, there are pros and cons to fast-tracking of consents. Those are explained at a high level in the committee report and the submission. Potentially the consenting can go faster, but the risk is that issues, effects are lost. Parties that are interested feel disengaged, iwi, potentially potentially groups, those sorts of things, affected landowners. I think generally people are aware of the pros and cons of fast tracking. Fast tracking is not a new concept, so this bill is based on the fast tracking legislation that was in the Natural and Built Environment Act that was proposed by the previous government, or passed by the previous government. I guess a key point I'd like to make is I guess it's slightly ironic, this submission is less about the pros and cons of fast tracking. While it does acknowledge there are pros and cons to fast tracking, this submission is more about advocacy of the ring road, the regional freight ring road. I think if we're going to get support and government investment for the ring road, we need that to be in the front and centre in the mind of officials and politicians. I think with the changes to the GPS and the government's priorities, the city is in a better position than previously to try and get the ring road funded. I think we do need to be bold in our advocacy. Remembering as well that in doing that, the ring road is part of Pinati. It was always part of Pinati. It's just under the previous GPS, it was likely that we're going to get funding for other parts of the urban network before the ring road. So we shouldn't shy away from advocating strongly for the ring road because it's part of Pinati. I guess, despite those changes in the GPS, the ring road is still not featuring on the list of RONs or regionally significant transport projects. As an example, the Hawke's Bay Expressway is. In speaking to officers at Waka Kotahi, one of the reasons the Hawke's Bay Expressway is on there was described to me as politics. Not business cases, not evidence, politics. So in summary, this submission points out the pros and cons to fast tracking, but is very clearly positioned at trying to get the ring road in front of officials and ministers in Wellington. So sorry, a little bit of context, and I think that's something we're going to have to think about in terms of our advocacy in a range of places across transport as we move forward about how do we best position Palmerston North to deliver on Pinity. Just a change of topic, not slightly, but a change of topic. After this paper was prepared and the submission the committee report and submission was authorised, we heard from Rangatane. They are working with a number of councils where they want their views on fast tracking expressed within council submissions, and they've been working with Horowhenua and others on that. They've provided us some text around their views of fast tracking and indicated that they would like those included in the submission. I appreciate you don't have those today. They arrived on Easter Monday. I was on annual leave yesterday. So I recommend that the Mayor and Deputy Mayor be given delegated authority to consider that material and potentially add it to our submission, and there's a recommendation prepared accordingly. So sorry, a little bit of a longer than I was anticipating, but thought there might be some questions about why we've positioned this the way we have. I also noticed there's a small typo as I was reading this again before, which we'll tidy up. So.
Thanks, David and James. So questions from me, and you explained it sort of, the understanding gets in front of some decision makers and that, but it still goes through this. It'll still go through the same sort of rigour that any business case or application would go through.
Well, I guess the first thing is, and it's touched on in the committee report and the submission, is, you know, we're still at quite a high level with regards to the ring road. So, you know, the fast track bill is about the consenting and designation of projects. So that's when you're seeking, you know, planning approval. Before you seek planning approval, you need, you know, good detailed information about where the route's going to be. So, for instance, we still don't know how you would bypass Bunnythorpe, how you would bypass Ashurst in detail, where the second bridge crossing would be. All of that work comes out through business casing, and that's where we'd expect there to be significant work with communities such as Bunnythorpe, iwi, all of those things before you then enter the fast tracking process. The other thing is to bear in mind, this bill is not the process that determines whether something is fast tracked. It just sets up the process for that. And what we're signalling is, if the bill is passed and then they call for fast tracking, we would put the ring road forward, not the treatment plant, which is listed in the submission. And again, that would be very much about trying to signal to government that we're serious about getting this project prioritised, funded and consented.
So it's really about getting in the queue.
Correct. I think the projects that are listed in Schedule 2A or 2B will be government priorities.
Right, okay, thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, David, for explaining how you're cunningly using the government's submission process to advance our interests there. I did have some questions about the bill itself that we've not covered in our submission, and I wondered if there were questions that we might be able to. So, for example, the bill talks about projects that have significant regional or national benefits, but I don't see a definition of what that means anywhere, and I wondered if it would be useful to ask for that clarification, unless I've missed it.
We could certainly add a sentence that asks for that clarification if we feel it's not clear. I know there is a process there for a select group of ministers to determine what ends up on Schedule 2A or 2B.
Or not 2B, that might be the question. And I suppose that is the reason I'm raising it, is how do we know what game we're playing if nobody's explained the rules? So...
Yeah, and I think the government have been clear that this is setting up the process for considering what would be added to 2A and 2B. You know, there's no harm in adding a sentence to say further clarification on how that would be prioritised would be useful to assist with our planning and advocacy.
Yeah. And my second question was about the Track 1 and Track 2. So Track 1, the projects that are going to be listed in the bill, but they're not in the bill at the moment. So how is this magic going to happen?
So through you, Chair, the the process that they've indicated through all this information is that following the submission period for the bill itself, there'll be a second submission period to actually get onto Schedule A or Schedule B. Noting that that is Pathway 2. There is also Pathway 1, which I think is designed for any projects that come up later than this submission period to then still be able to get recognised. So there's a lot of opportunities.
Thank you. That's helpful to hear that process is split out into this bit and then the next bit. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just your comment, David, I thought was quite salient around that really this is a political process we're going through, and I wonder whether it's worth mentioning that the National Party promised in 2017 and 2020 to fund the ring road, and whether it would be worth applying that political pressure in our submission, noting that they have committed to funding it before in the past. Well, it's in their manifesto.
Yeah, it is listed in deep in one of the pre-election documents, but it's certainly, I mean, I guess part of my comments about that we need to be bold in our advocacy is at the moment we're not seeing firm commitments to fund the ring road.
Yeah, perhaps my question wasn't clear. So I recognise this election just been they didn't, but the two before that they did. And so I'm wondering whether or not it's worth pointing that out to remind them that they had previously committed to this as a way of leveraging some political pressure.
Yeah, I guess it's a matter of judgment as to how much weight we want to put on, I guess, previous representation of the National Party, government compared to the current. I mean, there's probably no harm in a sentence or two that says, there has been previous, commitments to look at supporting the project or sort of generic statements.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks. We've heard a bit about how essential business cases are if we want to get any traction. So I'm really interested in your comments that sort of political advocacy might play more of a substantial role. Have you got any comments or views on, is one more weighty than the other?
Yeah, I might just comment on that generally. James also has some comments. I think the thing is, even under the previous government, we were still advocating alongside going through the business case process. So, but I think what we saw under the previous GPS and Pinity was that it was more likely that those urban network focused projects were going to receive funding under the previous GPS. That said, we were continuing to advocate as opportunities arose around the ring road. I think what we're seeing now is that Pinity was always designed to be able to ride the political waves. So as I said in my opening comments, the ring road is always part of Pinity. So I think what we're saying now is we'll continue to work with Waka Kotahi officials, work through business case processes. There are budgets in the LTP to work through the business case processes for the ring road and the other parts of Pinity. But with the change to the GPS and the government priorities, we're better placed, I think, to try and use our advocacy tools as much as possible to try and secure funding for the government. So we should, regardless of who's in power and their position, we should continue to work with Waka Kotahi officials and business cases process, but we should continue to advocate. It's just that our, those are both tools we should use all the time. It's just that there's potentially the ability, I think, to ride the current government a bit harder out the ring road because of the changes to the GPS.
Right, yeah, so timing is sort of important there. So we do need to be giving some strategic thought as to how we can most effectively advocate outside of submissions then?
Yeah, I think we should continue to look at the formal process that's available to us, and the political advocacy should form a strong part of securing funding for the ring road, Pinity and other projects.
All right, thank you. And so sort of in light of the advocacy focus of this submission, is it robust enough? It's a one-pager. Does it need to have supporting documents? Does it need to have sort of more oomph to it, or is it just sort of short and to the point and effective in its own way?
Well, the strategy was short and to the point. We've got the, there is you know, the spatial plan as well. The Transport Infrastructure Minister and Transport Minister have both talked about the value of spatial planning for the infrastructure plan. I would say as well, you know, we have now funded a Te Uu Tanganui program director. So CEDA, through the program director, are also submitting on this process, as well as the GPS and the regional land transport plan. So we are seeing more what you might call economic development advocacy happening alongside this, you know, funded through the city.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think some of my questions have been partially answered, but I just want to get a bit of clarification on this. To the officers, my understanding is that the primary purpose of select committees is to try to improve the quality of the bill. And given that this is an omnibus bill and deals a lot of things, wouldn't you agree that the best way to advocate for this is through, let's say, formal channels such as straight direct advocacy to the Minister of Transport or Infrastructure? I mean, why are we trying to bring awareness to an issue through the select committee process in this manner?
Yeah, certainly agree that we should be advocating to the Minister and officials through all avenues possible. The Mayor's office was attempting or had a meeting lined up with the Minister of Transport. I think it's in the process of being rescheduled. But as I said, you know, I think I agree that, you know, a select committee process is about improving the bill, but every member of Parliament that reads our submission will now also be aware that we're keen to get a ring road funded and built. And it comes back to that point about taking every opportunity to get that in front of officials and MPs.
Okay.
Councillor Harpiter.
Just one question about Hawke's Bay. Why do you think they got on the list ahead of us with their road?
I'm not sure, but without outing the Wakatahi official, I said, oh, where's the business case for the Hawke's Bay Expressway? It's politics.
Okay. Well, with the Minister of Regional Development, along the lines of Councillor Mickelard, is there a sit down in front of him because of regional development?
Yeah, well, certainly I know through the, I don't speak for the Mayor's office, but I know there is correspondence with both the Minister of Transport and Minister of Infrastructure regarding meetings on the ring road and other projects.
I was talking about regional development though.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, gentlemen. So we've got two recommendations there. A recommendation to Council that Council approve the fast approval bill submission, attachment 1, and that Council authorise Mayor, Deputy Mayor to make minor edits and additions to the submission to reflect the views, actually we should say, of Council and our partner, Rangitane o Manawatu. I'll look to move that. Could I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Look, I think the big thing here is getting in the queue, and it's evident by the officer's commentary that this city, unfortunately, and actually the wider region, isn't in that queue at the moment, and some of our neighbours are. In fact, getting our city in front of budget ministers and their officials is absolutely critical, and this is one way of doing it. It still needs to go through the, as David alluded to, the business casing of designation, then the actual planning, the consultation with our wider community, which is absolutely needed. You know, Bunnythorpe, to be fair, have just been waiting what is happening, and this will give it some traction. And the same with Ashurst, and that all needs to come by getting noticed. So this will be on in front of the eyes of those influencers. I understand our MPs on both sides of the House are really advocating for this in Wellington, and it's great to see a team effort of both Labor and National working for us, and that's really what you want happening for your city. I also understand that the Tūtanganui Governance Group are aware of this too, and of course Rangitane and Ngāti Kowhata are part of that group as well. So there's only good to come out of this, and we've spoken about advocacy in Wellington, and this is sort of part of it. It's a little bit different, but it's part of the current makeup anyway. So I hope you can support it. There being no other views, we'll vote. Thank you. That is passed, 14 votes for, thank you. Right, I'll now go to number 13. We're making progress. So this is around external funding and commercial revenue, and this is one of our reviews from the business assurance team. I invite Masuma Akhtar, our manager, up. Thank you. Oh, and Fiona, who's our commercial manager. Welcome. Page 179 of your papers, councillors.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having, well, actually, I'll just start with, I'll take the report as read in the interest of time, but a very, very quick high-level summary, if I may add, is that when we developed our last work program, and this is not the one that was recently amended, this is the original one from last year, we saw that there was an emerging risk around meeting financial obligations and that the organisation would need to shift its focus towards revenue streams that are not just rates. So as part of this review, we have assessed the framework that we have recently developed by finance and checked components of it to ensure that it does best set us up for the upcoming LTP and delivering it. So yeah, we won't take any more time and just jump straight into questions through you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Masuma. So can I just ask that? So this is a review of what we currently are doing, and maybe some commentary on the future. How long has our commercial team been going? I'm aware you looked after forests and a few other things in the past, but how long has the commercial team been going, and what has it been doing in the past? I sort of understand what you're going to do in the future, but what's the past?
Thank you. So the commercial advisory function was set up, I think, back in 2019. It hasn't been fully resourced since then. A couple of years ago, we established 2 other positions in that team. I have to say that it's quite a tricky area to resource. We've had, we've had challenges actually in bringing people into the role. So we have got 3 of us in the commercial advisory team in total. So myself as the manager, and we've just gone through a recent reset. So we have a commercial and funding advisor. So that role looks at securing, researching, tracking funding opportunities, and putting processes in place and making sure we're achieving our accountability obligations. And the other role, which again is a reset, is a commercial partnerships and funding manager role. So both of those roles at the moment are vacant. One of them has been vacant since September last year, and the advisor's role's been vacant since mid-February. So the focus of the team in the past and up until now has been mainly on fundraising, and probably since COVID, actually the main focus has been on government funding. So the previous government had provided quite a lot of government funding to councils. You'll be very, very aware that a lot of that was focused around water reform. And so, for instance, Better Off funding and transition support. So a lot of the work has been around those two aspects. So this is a really good opportunity to reset and focus on what the team is and the function is looking to achieve going forward. Not sure whether I've answered that completely.
Do you still look after forests and that sort of thing?
No. Only a few months ago, actually, that responsibility was transferred over to the infrastructure team. So about 4 or 5 months ago.
They're not going to chop them all down, are they?
There's no harvesting happening at the moment.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to the framework and the actual implementation, you do make mention about our in-draft long-term plan and some of the significant forecast assumptions, and we've obviously spent a morning debating some of those, which some of those larger projects are at 90% external funding. I just want to get a comment at this stage around how this piece of work might help. Can you see that achieving some of those outcomes even in its early stage?
That will certainly be one of the challenges for particularly the commercial partnerships and funding manager role. So one of the first things that the new person when they come on board will do is become familiar with what's in the LTP and then look at how to actually achieve some of those targets that are set out in there. I haven't got all of the answers today. I don't think anybody actually has got the answers today, but there are different ways of trying to address that, and that's what that role will be focusing on when they arrive.
In addition to that, just wider insights. Are other councils also doing these frameworks and these type of pieces of work around the commercial space?
I mean, most councils probably at a certain size and above would be having a commercial lens being applied to a lot of the work that's being done. In what form they do it, it's not, we wouldn't know that answer right now without actually going and checking those councils. But in terms of framework, every council will have some kind of operating model that they work under, some kind of processes that they do to deliver that kind of work as well.
Yeah. And again, Mr. Mayor, if I could. So I want to get a deeper understanding of that. In the report, it says detailed findings, recommendation, and agreed actions can be found in the attached review report, which I can go back for. That's fine. Yep, no, that's fine. I'll go back and have a deeper look on that. Thank you for this work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Tēnā koroa. I saw in your report you've talked about the recommendation that external funding should be sort of operating under a centralised model, and just noting what you talked about and the difficulties that you've had in recruitment, I'm wondering, is that the centralised model, would that be led out by the commercial advisory team, and how are we placed in terms of capacity and feasibility of getting that rolling?
In terms of the model, essentially what a centralised model would mean is that one role or one function would be sourcing, looking for those grants, and then bringing those in, administrating them. So yes, the recommendation and I believe management's intention is that it would be commercial advisory that leads that out. How we are placed, I know we've gone through recruitment, so I'll leave that one to Fiona.
Yes, and I'll just re-emphasise, it has been a difficult, a challenging type role to recruit into in the past. I'm hopeful, so we have appointed somebody into the commercial partnerships role, and that person will be starting in the middle of next month. So that's really encouraging, and we are working through a recruitment agency at the moment to fill the advisor's role. So again, encouraging signs, and I'm hoping to have both of those roles filled within the next couple of months.
Okay. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Masuma. So we've got a recommendation there to Council, that Council receive the memorandum titled External Funding Commercial Revenue Business Assurance Review and its attachments presented on the 3rd of April 2024. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Look, if I could just make a couple of very brief comments. I think this is stuff that should really come back to us a lot more about what this team's doing. I'm aware that they looked after some of our bigger contracts, i.e. cell phones, and some of the bigger procurement items that we had in the past, and forestry I know was very much part of it too. But actually, I think there's much more to this. This should be around our possible development partners, this should be around our trust funding, anything to do with government. I'm aware other councils look at this to attract external funding from different sources. They all do it differently. Some use EDAs, some do it via the Mayor's office, some smaller councils, and some, as us, have a separate unit which chases this. But I think we should be wrapping everything up in this. We should be extracting everything we can. I've often thought that we possibly have officers over too many different things. Who's looking after the Mercury Energy relationship? Who's looking after the CET relationship? Who's looking after NZTA? It all, in my mind, it all should be coming from at least an overview or one source. So it's something that I've sort of voiced my opinion to the CE about as well. But I mean, this is a good start. We need to, and thank you for Masuma for the more detailed report around framework, the operating, the advocacy. Advocacy comes into this as well. Unfortunately, some of the missed opportunities as well. But look, I think the key thing is that there is opportunities, and we've got to try and make every post a winner. So I'd like to think we could see this come into the chamber a little bit more and maybe tell us how we're going with some things as well in the future. No other commentary. We'll vote, please. That is passed, 15 votes for and against. All right, number 15 is around from Councillor Dennison. This memo is being read. It's around a brief report around Mihara Japan visit in late 2023. And again, I just take that as being read. Thank the councillor for that. Are there any questions of the councillor? There is. Councillor Bowen.
Just one thank you, Mr Mayor, just for clarity. Councillor Dennison, you talk in your report about PNCC Mihara and the Hiroshima Prefectural Board of Education entering a tripartite MOU for an annual scholarship. I wanted to check if that was an outcome of this visit, or was that something we were working on before and you were able just to speak to?
Thank you for the question. That was being worked on through our international office, and hence that's how I was made aware of it and referenced it in the visit. Mr Mayor might be able to add further from his recent visit, furthermore, if you
Yeah, we've got a report coming to council, I think, economic growth, going to Councillor Harper's committee. But yes, there has been a agreement signed where the Hiroshima Educational Board have agreed to a scholarship. Mihara will look after the pastoral care of students. I think there's a limited amount of students, and it gives some of our people an international flavour in Japan. It's an IB program. Those in education will know what I mean. So it's actually quite high value.
Thank you.
Yeah, it would certainly be a great opportunity for any student that was selected to take that on, and 3 years of tuition covered by that agreement.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to move that the Council receive the memo titled Mihara Japan Visit 2023, presented on the 3rd of April 24. I'll move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. Also worth noting that the prefectural government of Okayama are here right at the moment, and the Governor and some of his officers are in the city right at the moment. Commented what a green and beautiful city we had. And I believe the Deputy Mayor showed them round earlier today. Yeah. Okay, we will vote, please. It's passed 14 votes for, none against. All right, moving through to number 15, and this is our council work schedule on page 199, 200, 201. I'll take that as being read. Are there any matters arising from that? Councillor Bowen.
Just, Mr Mayor, that item number 2 is appointment of trustees, which is a late item for this meeting, so that will need changing.
Yes, we can cross that off, thank you. Nothing from you, Wade? No. Plenty to do. Yes, I agree. All right, recommendation, the council receives its work schedule dated 3rd of April 2024. I'll move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. And no matters arising, we'll vote. That has passed 50 votes for, none against. Thank you. All right, we've got recommendations from various committees, and I'd like to ask Deputy Chair of Risk and Assurance, Councillor Naylor, to speak to that. That's page 203 of your papers, Councillor. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I'd just like to move the recommendations from the Risk and Assurance Committee of the 6th of March. As outlined.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. Okay, we have the recommendations there from that committee meeting, councillors. Is there any matters arising? Councillor Isabella.
Mr Mayor, could we take them separately?
Sorry?
Could we take them separately?
Yes, we can take them separately.
Thank you.
Mr Mayor, sorry, there's that's different to what's in here. Is someone able to explain? There's
What is different?
Sorry, forget I spoke.
Yep.
It just wasn't shown.
Yes. So we're going to do separately. So we'll do 424 first, and then 5-24 second. Okay. Yes, you are right. I see what you mean. Yeah. They're around the. Are they around? Are they at the right way? I think we're right now. Okay. Thank you. You were right. Okay, so we're going to do 424 first. We'll vote on that, and then the second one will be 524. Vote on the first one, please. And that is 13 votes for, 2 against. Right, we'll do. And then we're going to do 524, please. And that has passed 13 votes for and 2 abstentions. Thank you. Right, number 17 on the order paper is recommendations from our Sustainability Committee on the 13th of March, and I'll ask the Chair, Councillor Barrett, to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, pleased to move the recommendations Part 1 Public Sustainability Committee meeting of 13th March 2024.
And seconded by Councillor Zabellin. Thank you. Okay, no matters arising. We will vote, please. and that is passed. 12 votes, 4 and 3 abstentions. All right, our next one is around our community committee recommendations from the 20th of March 2024, and I'll ask the Deputy Chair, Councillor Hancock, to speak to those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to present the recommendation from the Part 1 Public Community Committee meeting from the 20th of March for adoption, please.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Micallard. And are there any matters arising? There being none, we will vote, please. And that has passed. 14 votes for and 1 abstention. All right. Now need to vote to go to part 2, and for reasons of we're just getting it on screen. All right. We now have a recommendation to publicly excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting listed in the table below and under the Local Government Act, and if I can get those, please, for reasons of third-party commercial activities, and privacy. So look, I'm happy to move those, and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. If there's no commentary, we will vote, please. That has passed. 15 votes for, none against. All right, you've earned yourself an afternoon tea. We'll be back into the chamber at 25 to 4. Thank you.